Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to deal with the essay in BAEN 602 Modern Literatures paper. How should one read a book by Virginia Woolf? How should one read a book? That is the title of the essay. This is an essay, and you can read the title. How should one read a book? When you write down, you have to put it in double quotes because it's not a book length publication. It's an essay and it should be in double quotes. So question, how should one read a book? So obviously, as the title suggests, it's a question and we are going to get a lot of answers on that. As it is a question, by the end of with the reading, as we move on, we are going to get a lot of answers or at least suggestions, comments on the part of the essayist, writer, critic. So here it's a paper read at school. Most of her books actually take this kind of a form. Sometimes her lecturing, sometimes her discussion, presentation. Then later getting published as essays or a book length publication itself. Okay. So let us, before moving to the details, I'm going to read, planning for a line by line or at least a detailed way of analysis for this part. Still, even in that case, how should one read a book? Let us go for a very short description, at least a briefing of the whole part. First section, first paragraph, if you want to say, it talks about freedom in reading and interpreting. First session, the essayist will talk about the freedom, actually the act of reading. The whole essay is about the act of reading, different kinds of books, how to approach, what are the effect of after approaching certain kinds of books or different kinds of books in certain ways. How are we going to benefit as readers, later as critics, or in turn how our reading is going to contribute for the whole reading domain, intellectual domains. So this is the way this essay will get you a clear picture. You know how Francis Bacon talks about of books in his essay. He gives a lot of ideas. Reading maketh a full man. So such a very famous quotes are there on the part of that person. Here, if not as very prominent or famous quotes, certain ideas shall be given by the writer essayist, which we can take for granted. At least we feel them like sensible. Yes, this is sensible. She says what is, she says what is, it's right. What she says is fine. It's acceptable. At least we can think about that. Because she gives all these ideas in a very flexible way. She's not insisting that you should read in this way. As the title says, or title sounds like it's going to be preaching mode of an essay. It is the way you have to. Sometimes you get instructions in that way. Do's and don'ts. You should do in this way, you should not do in that way. Even though the title reads like that, though the title sounds like that, this is not a preaching kind. The essay doesn't take a preaching mode, preaching tone. The very beginning she says that. So first part it talks about the freedom in reading and interpretation. How important it is to have a kind of freedom. Assure a kind of freedom. Then next paragraph she will talk about many kinds of books in a library. You're going in a library. You are in a library. You see a lot of books, different kinds of books. And sometimes you are confused. Which one shall I take? Which one should I take? Which one should I read? In what way? Is this book going to benefit me in some way or other? So these confusions are you are likely to be confused at times at least. Then, she talks about the relevance of classifying books like poetry, fiction. We know even in libraries, we have such a practice of classifying books. You try to classify books. Certain libraries take that method of organizing books, where you have all the fiction all together in one shelf or one part of the shelf. Next set is that of poetry collection. Then reference text all in one part, one section. So this is the way you can classify books on the basis of their genre, meaning. Next part we will come across the comments upon how to approach a book or an author, and she mentions about the relevance of being very flexible, how important it is to be very flexible in your approach. Flexible, you should be very flexible, like you should be open, you should be willing to see the difficulty of reading every time. Obviously criticism is must, but criticism should not be leveled just for the sake of getting negative comments. So to see that, to get the idea, she says, the words and the fluidity of meaning. We will discuss that part in the context of post-structuralist idea, where you talk about the fluidity, flexibility, endless free play of signifiers. You have multiple signifying. See, one word can lead to another meaning. There you get another meaning. So there is no end for this process. It's an endless replay. And in such a situation, when a writer sits down to write, how difficult and how risky it is on her or his part to bring about a novel, to bring a poetry, to bring a short story. This is really risky, actually. We don't realize it if we always approach them with the intention of giving negative comments only. So, for that, to identify with them, to empathize with them, she says us to write something and to see and feel the difficulty of this process of writing. She says that, yeah, you see something, you witness a particular scene, you are walking on the road, or you are standing alongside and you see some people talking, some street lights, and many other sceneries. You try to recollect that when you're back at home. Yeah, it's very easy for you to recollect all those. But if you try to put it in words, try to write a poem on that, or try to write a short story, at least a traveling experience, you will find it how difficult it is to put something in words. And she says that this will be a very preferable practice if you try to write down the ideas that you see, you come across, you witness, you experience. You will understand the difficulty of the process of writing something. That's the next main idea. So just recalling is not actually that writing is not equivalent to just recalling something. It's tough. It's a tough activity. Then she next part of that essay will talk about the difference in themes and authors, their tastes. You talk about the novelists of a particular time period, novelists of 18th century, or novelists of modern time. But are they all dealing with the same themes? No. Some themes are very different. Some of them are preferably writing on the theme on something related with nature. Some people write only about drawing room experiences. Some people write biographical novels. So this is different, entirely different approaches, and their taste, their ways, approach towards literature, everything is different. So their taste, the difference in their taste shall be discussed as next paragraph, in the next paragraph. And how to approach such themes, choices, as readers, as interpreters, that also will be discussed along with that. And then she turns to books lacking quality, like very inferior kind of writing, which are never keeping the standard or demands of quality, which are never assuring quality, like a biographical, autobiography. She's not actually happy about the autobiographical or biographical publications. And she asks, what is the purpose of our reading that? Is it about, yeah, we all are interested in knowing others' lives, interrupting others' lives. So is this the real intention of your reading that? No, maybe you may be benefiting out of, but still she talks about the possible disgust we can come across, we can feel at a certain point, after a certain point. You are reading and reading and reading to biographies, autobiographies, but obviously, certainly you are liable at a stage, at some stage at least, you will feel like, oh, this is somewhere boring. And then she will talk about repetition, that possible repetition, locking geographically certain. You're always reading some books selectively, like in a selected manner from London, some of the geographical areas, so that you don't have an exposure to other lands, how their cultures look like. You never read anything about India, anything from India, so that you learn the way these writers have portrayed Indian culture, Indian society, Indian lifestyle. Same with if you are not, if an Indian is very particular about reading Indian novels only, Indian writings only, so that you never have an exposure to the lands of different other geographical spaces. Think about Wuthering Heights. We get a picture. We get a picture of that countryside. Even in Solitary Reaper, we know that, yes, so that highland reaping, that is there also. Unless and until unless we have the picture that all of them are always within coats and suits, in white collar jobs, in industries. But there also we have, yeah, people living in that way, laymen are there. We get the picture from such portrayals only. So how important it is for us to be very open and broad towards the literary multitude. It's a heterogeneous multitude. Writings, themes, approach, criticism. Everything is there, but we should be open enough to approach those. And she will talk about the just a review on my part. Still, new historicist cultural materialistic turn, like cultural materialism talks about how important it is to read Shakespeare, not just in the context of 16th century political scenario of England, but how relevant he is in the present day. When you read Hamlet, when you read some other plays of this writer, you can now think about the misogynistic approaches, themes in him. You praise Shakespeare, but nowadays you make use of the modern theories, modern thoughts to think about, to analyze how this writer, how prejudiced this writer had been against women. At least some of his themes, intentionally or unintentionally, turned to be very harsh denial of woman identity, women question. It's very problematic themes, problematic portrayals are there in Shakespeare. So if you place him just in 16th century, you're not bringing him the relevance of those writings. You're away from analyzing him in this context. That is possible, but and that's what cultural materialists say. You should not place a work just in the context of its being, but you can take the present day political implications of that and how to criticize with that eye on mind. In that way, also you should approach a text. So, biographical criticism. Later, she talks about biographical criticism. How we sometimes turn to look or analyze a writer's life reading after reading his or her books. That is one part. Then she will talk about the importance of looking at nature. You're reading, you are searching bookcases in a library. Bookcases, bookshelf I mean. There, at a point you feel like, oh, I'm tired of reading or searching. So just look outside through the window. You can see a lot of people, not just people, women, men, living fleeting moments. They are moments and certain. It's a sheep, goats, donkey. Donkeys stand for all kind of animals, other activities throughout all the while. Everyone is living their lives. And later, that also may be accommodated by some writer. So what literature is representing is life itself. In one way or other, you are getting representations of different lives. Sometimes known to you, sometimes unknown to you. Sometimes familiar, sometimes unfamiliar kind. That's why sometimes when you even when you watch some movies, sometimes you say like, oh, this may not happen. How it is possible? How it's not possible in real life. I'm not talking about fantasies, but even the very realistic portrayals, you may feel like, oh, this is not at all possible. How can it be like this? How can it be like that? But only one thing is there. You are not exposed to that. At some point, somewhere, at some point of the history of human race, different lives have been there. Different ways of living have been there, and in literature or in any other kind of art forms like visual representations. If you get it represented, if you get it portrayed, if you get the portrayals, it's an additional exposure to something unfamiliar to you, that's all. You cannot always insist that it will not take place. It doesn't happen. So that's the importance of having exposure to different lives, and most often you get it through different artistic representations, especially in writings. Nowadays we have visual representations as well, but when you have to think about a time when Virginia Woolf was publishing her essays, talking about her ideas. Okay. Then she will go to comments on fiction, different kinds of fiction, their themes, everything. Then she will turn to poetry. She will talk at great length about the intensity of poetry, the tough task of a writer how difficult it is to compose poems comparatively when you talk about other kinds of literary types. Rather, it's very difficult to compose poems. That's what she says. Obviously, that's right. Don't you think so? Yes, I think so because in very short space, okay, you can write down epics at a great length with a number of lines, fine. But even nowadays, we have the tendency to write down very short poems. So to put it very, put all the themes into two or three stanzas, it demands much on your part. That's why that once I'll give you that quote. Like I don't have. I'm writing a long letter because I don't have time to write a short letter. To make things concise is very difficult. And again, mainly regarding this essay, just think about that. I read whole essay yesterday as a part of preparing this for you, for teaching this today. So anyway, I'm going to read this in this detailed manner. But to put all these things, I had to take much time to write down my own comments on the margins of each paragraph so that a briefing can be possible. Briefing is very difficult. You talk about plot summary of a novel. How difficult it is actually. How intense the work of the person behind that is. You have to think. Very difficult it is. To talk about this essay actually in printout it runs to some 12 to 13 pages I think. And to brief all the what a paragraph talks about. That's what I'm reading you actually. The points, but explanation is there along with that. Still the points are there and I spent some 3 hours yesterday night to read this completely. To make this in this way. Reading, passionate reading is very different from what we do for teaching purpose. Actually reading a novel is something entirely different. If you are seriously reading, definitely that also takes time. You have to underline points, you have to write your commentaries. That's very important and urgent. But this is very difficult a task, and she talks about the intense work, intense task of a poet, especially a poet, not about any other writer of any other type of genre. Then, poet's power. All those points come together. Then next, after discussing that, she talks about deep reading. How important it is for us to go for deep and serious reading. So, approaching a book as a book from different parts of its being, and approaching its whole being, it's entirely different an experience. And she talks about very beautiful sentences. The wait for the dust of reading to settle. Reading a book, you read 12 to 13 pages of a novel today, then 20 pages next day, the next 20 to 25 pages in the coming days. So that is almost like a scattered where you are in search of its ideas, what the book communicates. You are in search of that. And at the last stage, final stage, you try to settle all those ideas, combine all those ideas to bring a whole, at least to feel a whole about it. That's very important. Then she talks about the importance of our being at least friendly towards the writers. Because she says that, okay, you read a book, you feel like, oh, I have wasted my time on this. It's not worthy reading. Still, she says that you should be a kind of, at least you should feel a bit of concern for them. Because anyway, they have written, they have taken their effort. After all, they are not corruptors of the society, defilers, criminals. They are not enemies. They wrote something that only is possible on their part. At some point, she talks about the financial benefit based writings and how it is devaluing the act of writing, this great art. Such writers are there. She doesn't deny that. Still, we should hold a friendly approach towards every writer. That's what she says. Anyway, and again, comparing and judging as the second part. It's very important a turn in the essay where she will talk about comparing and judging. So, as the second part of your reading. Interpretation is needed. After that, you have to go for judging and comparing it with other writers. That's difficulty in commenting. It's passing judgment is very difficult actually. You cannot say that this book is good, that book is bad. Again, every comparison is very difficult actually. This is good, that is bad. This writer is better than the other one. It's just your view. It doesn't have much to do with the area of criticism in general, but still that is relevant in one way or other. That's what she says. Everything, every activity related with the reading is relevant, important, and it has its own importance in its turn. Then later she will talk about the common qualities in certain types of books. How to, and then about the quality, common qualities sometimes, how important it is to identify certain qualities, common qualities in books. And then crossing, sometimes we say like, yeah, I like motivational books. You might have come across people say like that. Actually, some people say it's pulp fiction. And you might have come across people always reading selected manner writers. Some writers only I would like to read. You might have come across people talking like that. It's not the, she's not recommending this. But that possibility or that kind of people she mentions here. That's what Wolf mentions here. Then, as the last part, she talks about the importance of taking our own stand, our own individuality, uniqueness in the act of reading, or when you approach writing, how important it is to read or take a stand of your own individuality, your own interpretation, your own understanding of things, life. Everything is relevant in your reading a text. Then at the last part of the essay will come across every review as important. As the essay has been talking about, trying to emphasize that how should one read a book? It's a serious activity. It's a very serious activity. How should one read a book? And that question is relevant. Though she's not going to give you a preaching mode of commentary or instruction. Preaching, what do you mean by preaching? It's a kind of teaching which demands you to follow that. But in the very beginning, she says about the freedom, the importance of having freedom in the act of reading. Okay? Yes. So we will go to essay now.